Meet Robert Williamson, the A grouper who trained as an apprentice in Broken Hill and worked his way up to be a mining executive. He is today's guest on A Home in the Outback, an independent podcast about people living, working and creating in the far west of New South Wales. I'm your host, Catherine Waite. Robert is the oldest of 4 boys, but when his mother died from breast cancer, he decided to stay in Broken Hill and help his father. He got himself a trade at Zinc Mine and was offered training in industrial electronics, which became an in-demand skill. As a young man, he travelled and worked at Bougainville Copper and overseas at a kibbutz. When he returned, he moved to the Western Australian region of the Pilbara and was there maintaining dump trucks and mining equipment at iron ore mines. When he was working at a Dampier mine, he introduced a robotic system to the way Rio Tinto managed their port system, which earned him praise and accolades from the mining sector. He was headhunted to develop and establish robotic systems all over the world, including iron ore ports in China. He went into mining consulting, and among his achievements was selling US $10 million worth of technology to the large Brazilian mining company Vale. More recently, Robert's attention has returned full circle back to Broken Hill, which he says is completely coincidental. With his business partner Gordon Toll, he's currently in the process of applying for a mining licence for Lodestone Mines to develop Australia's next big iron ore project in the Braemar region in South Australia. The proposed mine site is just over 1.5 hours southwest of Broken Hill, inland from the small South Australian town of O'Leary. Robert is based in Adelaide but travels regularly to Broken Hill for business. Are you an A grader?
Yeah, an A grouper.
An A grouper, that's the correct terminology,
Yes,
isn't it?
Yes, so I'm an A grouper. My parents met in Broken Hill, and my father had come to Broken Hill to build the MBHC mine, and he'd met my mother, who had come with her parents, who had the ballroom dancing classes and hall in Broken Hill, and I'm the firstborn, and can lay claim to being an A grouper. I suppose my father's background is Scottish, but my mother's background goes back to my great-great-great-grandfather on my mother and grandmother's side, who came into South Australia in 1849, and I've actually traced the history of that family, which is the Lascott family, which are known also for starting the nursery business here in South Australia, but and I've also been able to go and pay my respects at his gravesite in Willunga. So it's part of my passion for history and obviously my own family's history.
Now, how did you get into mining?
In Broken Hill, that was the biggest employer. I was looking to matriculate, but there was also an opportunity to head off and get an apprenticeship. And the things that were sort of stopping me from matriculating was the fact that I would then have to leave town to go to a university, and at that time I was actually helping with the family because I had a mother who was sick, and so it was important that I stayed around. So I became an apprentice electrical fitter on the mines, which I would say is one of the best apprenticeships you could ever have, because you have everything from underground and open cut mining to process plants, power stations, through to rewiring the managers' houses, and there was such a varied, working in the maintenance workshops, rewiring motors, such a varied apprenticeship as an electrical fitter. Sets you up well. So that was the way that I started, was through there, and I at the end of my apprenticeship, the mines approached me because electronics was coming into the industry, and technologies were improving, and they then sent me off to Sydney on a block release to learn industrial electronics. So I went from and so I eventually became an engineer, but I did it through the different training that I did with the different mines. So
for someone who doesn't know, what is industrial electronics?
The electronics that today is what's behind the TV screen or what's in the phone. But industrial electronics is the fact that in the early days there were more primitive ways to control the speed of motors. They usually needed commutators and brushes and what have you, and with the advent of diodes and silicon controlled switching, you were able to switch things on and off and create different frequencies, and therefore control speeds that way. So I got into that, and that at that time that was the thing, and I went all the way through that to robotics.
And where did you have your electrical apprenticeship at? Which mine?
At the Zinc.
At Zinc.
Yeah.
So you go to Sydney and you do this electronics training. Where did you go from there?
I went up to Bougainville Copper. Yeah, they were looking for people with that training, and I was one of the first to be trained, and so it was very easy to get a job with them. And I went up there, and they had just started building these new types of excavator equipment, which was driven by electric cables, and it had all of this new electronics on it. So I got a job up there, and I did that, and I moved reasonably quickly into the management of the maintenance and managing others and helping them to do that. So that was part of the going up there and working on Bougainville.
What was there a reason why you chose to go to Bougainville, or were you just went where the work was?
Well, I suppose Bougainville was also owned by the same company.
Okay.
And so I felt that I had a loyalty to the mother company as far as they had trained me.
So Rio Tinto was the mother company of Zinc?
Before Rio Tinto, CRA.
Okay.
So CRA owned Bougainville and owned the mines in Broken Hill.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I felt a loyalty, and so I went up there, and I was up there for 3 years. Working in the mining up there. I used the money that I was making up there to go on a bit of a holiday in Europe and in the Middle East. One of the interesting things about the Middle East is that I actually worked on the kibbutz that was attacked in October. I have my own views on both the Palestinians and the Israelis, and I think they both have their faults, and I think that they're both nice people in their own ways. And I went to work on a kibbutz, and they wanted my electronic skills as well, and so they had a factory that had electronic drives in it. But they also had me working in the people's houses, and the houses were being done up. The skilled stonemasons were all coming in from the Gaza. They were all Palestinians, and they were great people, different to the Israelis and what have you. So I had a bit of a holiday there, and then when I wanted to come back into mining, I actually had a talk to the same recruiting guy that had got me into Bougainville, and he said, well, they're looking for people over in the West. And so I went and worked at Hammersley Iron, and I was basically there for 16 years.
So for someone who doesn't know the region, where is Hammersley Iron?
So Hammersley has mines in around the Paraburdoo and Tom Price area, and now out at Yannikajina, and then all of the ore was taken through to the port of Dampier, and so I started in Paraburdoo, and then I ended up in Dampier, and then I was I was working on mining equipment, and then I was working. I got a job where they trained me in robotics, and I was actually building the robotic labs, and then I got a senior job within there, and then when they started building the new mines, I would go out to those new mines and I would build the technical services part of those mines. So I had a history there with some of the guys now that are the very senior leaders of the different mining groups in the West. So.
Yeah, so this is northwest Western Australia, and a huge kind of iron ore region.
Absolutely.
Rob, that area of Western Australia is well known for, I guess, iron ore, but what's your insight as a mining executive in terms of that whole region and the future? Is there lots there still to be mined?
Look, what's happening in the West is that they're mining it so quickly that a lot of the good grade stuff is starting to finish. Of all of the mines that are over there, the group that will have the good grades for the longest will be BHP. They still have some very good prospects that they're starting to mine now. The thing that happens is that as the grades go down, it's the deleterious elements that are associated with the lower grades, which then in today's world create the emissions when you try to make steel. And so that is the problem that's starting to happen in the West. And
to go back to the 16 years that you spent with on the West Australia with those mining projects, so what did you do? What was your role when you first got there?
Well, I was working on the electronic drives of the excavating equipment, and then I moved over to look after the haul trucks.
When you say working on, do you mean maintaining, like fixing if there was a problem?
That's right. Both general planned and breakdown maintenance, and so you usually start in the planned maintenance, and then once you get a feel for all of the equipment, then you're given a shift, and you work a 3-shift roster, and you've got your offsiders, and you go out there and you make sure that everything stays working.
And is that really important to keep everything going all
Absolutely.
The time?
Yeah.
And are these big dump trucks?
Well, yeah.
And excavators.
And excavators, shovels. And that had been what I was working on when I was in Bougainville as well. And when I was back in Australia, the work ethic that we had within our group was production, and so we were happy if all of the trucks were going and all the excavators were going, and we could then get onto the spare trucks and increase production, and so that's what we did, and it was actually quite fun because we were all trained in operating all of that equipment too, so we could use the excavators and we could use the trucks, and so there was a rivalry between the shifts, and so that also helped with production because we were we'd say, well, we got X tons, as we're walking out the gate and they're walking in, sort of thing. So yeah, that's quite good.
And at what point were you in Western Australia that you kind of worked into management?
Look, I got into management after, so I moved from the mining equipment into the technical services. So this is the laboratories.
Yes.
And I was taken over to the laboratories to start building the robotic laboratories at the ports, and then from the ports I came back to then build the other laboratories at the new mines as well. So
the term laboratories, I found that intriguing, because I always think of laboratories in terms of science and things like that, but to hear it in terms of mining, what does it mean? You're like testing kind of equipment?
Well, there's a whole science. So if you look at all of the different technical streams in a mine, there's a lot in the geological area, then there's geometallurgy, there's geophysics, and then there's straight metallurgy, and a lot of this is done in laboratories. So the geologists are looking at where the rocks came from and how and where they are and what they look like, but they need to know sort of the head grades and the in situ grades of what
like the
found.
quality. Is that what you mean?
Well, it's how much iron ore is in that rock.
Yep.
Then the metallurgists are about how does the rock behave when you crush it, because in the end we want to be able to get it into a form that then is made into steel. The geophysics guys are looking at where it occurs and how deep in the ground it is, and the geotechnical guys are looking at, if we're setting the mine up like this, we need to look at the rock walls to make sure that the mine doesn't fall over. So there's a lot. All of these disciplines, and they all need different analysis equipment in a lab to understand what they're doing. So when I talk about a lab, that's what it is.
So it's the tools and equipment that these people
Yep.
need to kind of work out, the function of how the mine's set up. And
That's correct.
Okay, so you moved into laboratories, and what were you doing again in the laboratories?
Well, the main thing that the company was trying to achieve was to gain the trust of the customer, which was the Japanese and the Chinese, in the fact that what their laboratory was telling them when they were loading the ship was true. And up until that time, they were required to, they would only pay 90%, and then they would use their own laboratories over in Shanghai or somewhere else to prove the last 10%. And so in developing these robotic laboratories, we took away the human element and gained a trust that the robots were doing everything. There wasn't a Monday morning and a Friday afternoon difference, and that the robots were doing everything perfectly, and they were making no mistakes. And then that led to us being awarded at CRA or Rio Tinto what's called load port final, which is that they'll pay 100% on the loading of the ship at the load port, not wait until they do it for the last 10% based on doing a second assay. So when it comes to the discharge port.
Yeah. So you're talking about, I guess, a big part of the business of how miners make money and how it's determined, and
Yep.
so there's some kind of sample, I guess, is that right?
That's correct,
taken from the mine.
So when you're at the port, the samples are taken off the conveyor.
Yeah.
And they're brought into a laboratory which has robots in it, and those robots are car industry robots that can handle.
Did you say car engine?
Car industry.
Oh, car industry. Yeah.
Robots, and these robots can handle 150, 200 kilograms, and the larger the sample that you can handle, the more accurate you can be. And so we developed equipment that would sit around a robot that had a complete circular arc that could move samples between different analytical equipment, and so that would happen as the ship's being loaded, so that as the ship's getting ready to sail, we can give a value for that ship and send an invoice.
What are the things that you're looking, or the companies are looking for to value it? Is it like the water or the?
Well, the first thing is the iron grade.
Yep. And how do you work out that?
Well, you keep taking samples and you split these samples down until you create a composite which is representative of all of what you've sampled, and you analyse that in a what's called an X-ray fluorescent machine, where you can actually measure the elements. So you're mainly after the iron elements, but you're also after the deleterious elements. So you measure that. That's an assay. You would also look at it for moisture, because moisture is important, especially because the customer doesn't pay for moisture. So you've got to subtract the moisture from the equation, and you also have to look at the size fractions, because This stuff has been mined and then gone through a crushing process, and the larger fragments from around 9mm to 40mm in the hematite game are a lot more valuable than the smaller fragments, because when you get to the processes of heating them and what have you, as they sit together, they're more porous than all of the very small stuff which clumps together, for which you have to have other processes to briquette them or pelletise them or what have you. So so there's that's the main thing that you do with those slabs.
So by introducing the robots into the lab process, you're creating a more exact understanding of what's been loaded onto the ship and what the customer's buying. That's
right, and then it also because the robots are accurate and don't make mistakes. It created a trust from the customer, who then agreed that they didn't have to, it saved them money not even having to do the same thing at the other end.
Yep.
And so they agreed that they pay the whole lot up front, and so that's what we achieved.
So how did this come about? Did the company say, Rob, we want you to do this, or did you just take this idea to the company? Like, how did it all happen?
No, the company, I think if you have a look at BHP and Rio Tinto, and if you go all the way back to the start of Broken Hill, these mining companies have always been about innovation and technology. They really have. You have a look at Delprat, and they went looking for Delprat. They went looking for Patton. These different people that came into BHP, and then it was BHP that said, well, hang on a minute, let's start making steel, and so let's mine iron ore as well as mining, the silver, lead, and zinc and what have you. When it was the company was looking to innovate, and it wasn't all beer and skittles, because I actually threw out stuff that had been started by others which wasn't going to work, a lot of prototypes and what have you, and we just got down to the bare bones of, this is going to work, let's get it working, and through that innovation we were able to create this greater trust, and therefore the transaction happened a lot quicker.
So you basically earned the company a lot of money, I guess.
Yep.
In the summary of that is because you were able to, they were able to charge up front for everything that was on the ship.
Yeah.
So did you get Employee of the Year, or were you recognised for all of that work? Or?
I got recognised by the managing director of Rio Iron Ore at the time, and I was awarded the Engineer of the Year in Australia, and I was also awarded not just for working in that innovation, but in my spare time I would go into the schools and teach the kids robotics using Lego robots, and including the Aboriginal communities around that area. And I brought the President of Engineers Australia up, and he gave me the President's Prize. So I've earned a few awards for being able to use technology for the company's advantage. Yeah.
Mm. So what happened after working in kind of Dampier? What did you do then?
Well, the companies that were building the equipment that went around the robot approached me for two reasons. One reason was that they could see that robotics was going to work in the commercial lab game, not only in the industrial mining lab game. And so they needed a name. And the second thing is that they wanted to do an IPO. They wanted to list, and so they wanted the right people in the business when they listed. So I went from the operating mining environment into the lab construction environment, and we were successful in that game, where we were able to attract the world's largest lab groups and convert them into robotics. So we built some of the larger labs that are in Perth are all robotic, through the robotics that I helped to develop.
Forgive my ignorance. What's the difference between industrial and commercial labs?
Well, I suppose what I mean by industrial is the labs are internal to the mining company.
Okay.
Commercial labs are where a lot of other groups, like I'm in an exploration company now, we would use the commercial labs because they would do all the assaying for us because we're not big enough to have our own internal laboratories.
Okay. Yep.
So,
all right. Yeah. So you start. Did you say you started selling or making equipment?
Well, I was in the group that was making it, and it was I was the guy that then started to design these processes that went with it, and then I would be working with the lab executives in the different countries. So I did a lot of travel to a lot of different countries, and and we were able to convince them, and they started buying these lab systems, and we were implementing them. And so I spent a lot of time in South Africa. I spent a lot of time in Europe, and in the Americas, and we started to sort of implement these systems in different parts of the world.
Are you saying that I guess Australia was leading the way with robotics?
Look, Australia in mining has always been one of the best innovators. I think a close second to Australia would most probably Chile, but definitely Australia, for its isolation, being an island. You take it upon yourself to just invent your own stuff, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's, I suppose, that's what I did. And I actually also learnt that because I moved out of that game when the financial crisis hit, and because a lot of money stopped flowing into exploration, and so these commercial labs just weren't getting the work. And I went into the mining consulting business, and I was working for one of the world's best mining consulting groups, and I was given a job as one of the executives there, and I firstly achieved a sale of their mining technologies into one of the big four, which was Vale, and I spent a lot of time in Brazil working on that, and I really enjoyed that, and that again is where I saw the Brazilians are buying an Australian technology, and they had 21 mines, 21 iron ore mines, and you'd go up into the Amazon, and you'd be up in a town that's inside a cage because there's panthers and stuff on the other side of the cage. It was quite an incredible time. But so I work with them, and that's most probably one of the first times that I come across my current business partner, Gordon Toll, was when I was working within that mining consulting group.
Yeah, so you are spending a lot of time back in Broken Hill now because you've got a project near Broken Hill that you're trying to get off the ground. So your current business partner is Gordon Toll, and so tell me about the project and I guess how you came to think that this place near Broken Hill is where you want to focus your energy and time.
Well, I had so we were helping to develop Fortescue, and Gordon was at one stage the chairman, and so I'd known him then, and I'd known of him before then because he was the head of mining at Rio Tinto, and so he was actually like, he was like the chief mentor. So he would go to the mine manager of every mine that Rio owned. I'm talking the big platinum mines in Africa. I'm talking different types of mines, including borax and what have you, in the US and in Canada, and iron ore and all that. And he was well known, and his schoolmate Lee Clifford was the CEO, and of course also Lee Clifford has a connection to Broken Hill because he married a Broken Hill girl and what have you, and what have you. So it was actually when I was building these robot labs that the Chinese, because they're the ones that were giving these mining companies the low port final because of the robots. And when I'd come out and I was inside the lab construction group and not in at Rio, I then went to BHP and built theirs. And then after that, there were some built at FMG and what have you. But then the Chinese said, well, hang on a minute, we need robots at the other end because we trust the Australian robots, but the Africans and the Brazilians don't have them. And so we want to take the upper hand and say that what we're doing is what we're going to pay for, not what they're doing. And so I then spent a lot of time in China. And I tell you that because that was the next time that I ran into Gordon, because he was interested to go to China, and so I took him to China and we started talking to the steel mills. And I'd been in China building these discharge ports, and so I had relationships with the government and with the steel mills and what have you. And so fast forward to today, I'm now a director of his company, of which he's the chairman, and I am now a reasonably large shareholder of that company as well. And the fact that it's near Broken Hill is a great thing. I think it's just a pure coincidence. I like the fact that it's near Broken Hill, and there are a lot of good people that can work in our project that are in Broken Hill. It's nice and close. I think it's a natural progression for them. I also have a vision to really get stuck into creating a full apprenticeship scheme, training both local Indigenous and other local children. Go right into the schools and give them a reason for doing their schooling and then becoming an apprentice. And I suppose I'm the proof in the pudding. That's what I did. I was an apprentice, and now I'm where I am. And if I can do it, anybody else can do it. So that's my role at the moment. Obviously, is looking after stakeholders and looking after the people. And although I've been involved in building the mines and stuff before, we've got some good people in our board that have built completely built mines, like Michael. That will be the guys that will be able to help us build the mine, and my role will be to keep an eye on that, but also to be looking after all of the different people in the different communities and what have you.
So the company that you're a director of is Lodestone Mines.
That's correct.
And that's the company you've mentioned Gordon Toll is the chairman of. So it is coincidental that it's near Broken Hill. So what is there that you think it's worth building a mine?
We have an independent study that tells us that the tenements that we hold have a potential 30 billion tonnes of iron ore.
And where is this?
So this area is an area called the Braemar Iron Province, and it was an area that was discovered by Douglas Mawson, who is another bloke that worked in Broken Hill, married Del Pratt's daughter. Great history with Mawson. And one of the things with Mawson is that he found what we've got, and what we've got is an ancient seabed which was formed under glaciation when the Earth 700 million years ago was frozen, and it was frozen for a period of time. And he knew that, and he knew it was a glaciation, and he contacted Shackleton and went to Antarctica to study glaciations because of what he saw that what we've got now. The fact that he got stranded and the problems that he had just happened, and the fact that he survived is incredible. He's obviously, what a man to what he went through to do that. But it's the geologist in him and what he saw, and then what we have. So it's called the Braemar Iron Province, and what we hold are the by far the highest in situ grades, and we have it in an area where we have the ore at the surface in very soft undulating hills, not mountains, and not deep underground. So we can just start open cut mining it and just hit it at the start. So we're developing it now. The thing that takes a lot longer now is all the permitting, and that's my job. So I'm working through all the permitting that I've got to do with all of the government departments, and using the best consultants that we can find to do that sort of work. And I just showed you the 50-year book of BHP, and the bit where Sturt found rocks at Broken Hill in 1844 and took them back to Adelaide, and the government lost them. So that's what I'm dealing with now.
New South Wales gain.
Well, look at Broken Hill, I suppose, could have been in South Australia. Sturt was in 1844. It was a long time before Federation and what have you. And so, look, it is what it is. But it's a good project. This is. I'm glad that I can help Broken Hill. As you know, I do a few other things. I've got a book company about to bring out a book about the pubs. It's a real interesting book. 100 pubs, 70 pubs in Broken Hill, 30 on any road that leads out of Broken Hill, basically. And it was really enjoyable working with Emily, Megan, and Gavin in putting this book together. But we've already published the CWA book and the book about rock and roll, and I've also published Barbara Di Franceschi's poetry book. So when people ask me where do you get the time, I just say I don't play golf. So that's my saying, is that I do that. Obviously I've got a few other things going on. I've got some other interests that I own that keep me busy. But the mining thing is mostly 120% of my time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I did wonder, why hasn't there been a mine there before? If the grade is so good and it's at the surface, why hasn't anything happened there before?
Well, the answer again is technology, right? So it's the fact that the South Australian government has known, well, obviously Mawson knew about it, right? But the South Australian government had actually been doing test work in and around this Braemar iron province since the 60s, and the South Australian government actually developed the Radium Hill mine, which is very close to where we are, in the late 50s, early 60s, and what have you. The fact that it was there, but it needs to be beneficiated, and up until recently, all beneficiation required water, and there's no water there. And we've solved that in two ways. One, we've found water, and the other way is that we have found a process that means we don't have to use a lot of water. It's a dry grinding process, and we've proven that process. We've done a lot of test work on that process, and so this means that this area can now be commercially exploited based on the new technologies that weren't around before.
When are you hoping this mine will be up and running?
Well, we are trying a number of different ways to get it done as quickly as we can. We do have very good support from the South Australian government, and I'm in charge of getting everything permitted and everything designed. And I would hope that we would be starting to break ground to build something, by the end of 25, early 26. If we can get everything designed and permitted across this year and next year. That's what I'm hoping, so that by the end of 26 or early 27 we could be putting ore into trains and onto ships. So that's what we're aiming to achieve.
And how big is the project? How many staff do you anticipate you'll have?
Oh, look, I think and this has taken a few iterations, because we've had a look at different equipment configurations. We were looking at whether we were going to sort of do some mobile mining or whether we were going to do some excavator truck stuff. It's coming back to doing excavator truck stuff. So we're most probably we could have somewhere up to 60 or 80 people per shift. So we're most probably going to build a couple of 100-man camp. But then we've got people that've got to drive the trains and people that've got to load the ships. When you do something like this, and there'll be people back in Broken Hill who have to maintain the gearboxes, and there's for every person that works at the mine, there's mostly another 2 or 3 people that get a job somewhere else doing something else. So it will be a good employer both for Broken Hill and for South Australia. It will be a good revenue through the royalties that the South Australian government will get, and you know they've got things that they would like to do with royalties when they could get royalties, so they can fix their health system and other things like that. So if they can help us permit this thing quickly, then they can get those royalties. So that's what we're after. Yeah.
Rob, I know that we've only touched the surface of who you are and everything that you're involved in, and your wealth of knowledge. And I often hear you saying to people out in Broken Hill, here's my number, call me, if you want any help, which is very generous because you are a very busy man, but it's genuine. But I just wanted to say thank you for your time, and also I do know that you're going to be at Ag Fair selling some of your books.
That's correct. Yeah. So, and there's a story behind that because some of the guys behind Ag Fair helped me. I had that involvement in resurrecting the BDT, and the first non-mining people that came in were some of the guys that are behind Ag Fair and sell into the agricultural industries and what have you, and so I thought, well, why not? I thought, well, look, I could have a launch at the Palace Hotel, but I thought, no, well, I talked to Ag Fair, and Emily will come out. She's the lady that's done all the research and put it all together, and I've got the other books. I've still got some of them for sale as well. So looking forward to that at the start of May. Just got to get the whip out on the book publishing people and get them to print it and then and bring it up. So
come and buy your copy of Broken Hill Pubs. Is that what it's called?
It's called Pubs, Publicans and People of Broken Hill on the Far West.
Yeah.
And it is a good read. There are some pretty good stories in there. That it is so funny. I tried to get a couple of the significant pub people to write the foreword. In the end, I've written it, so it is they're my words, and there's some such interesting things that have happened. So the history of the pubs is a different view of the history of Broken Hill, the same as the book before, which is the CWA, which is the history of the women of Broken Hill, because they obviously couldn't. They couldn't work on the mines, and at the start they couldn't be in the unions. So, and then this one is when there was that attack on the train, they formed the reprisal group at one of the pubs that doesn't exist anymore. But every bit of Broken Hill history has got something to do with one of those pubs. So it is a good read.
Thanks so much, Rob. Was there anything else you wanted to add before I finished?
Nothing that I can really think of. I just, obviously, as you get older, you like different things, and so that's where the histories come in. And obviously, my family has a history, so I really like that history, and I like the Broken Hill history and my family's involvement in the history of Broken Hill, and so that and along with being involved in an exciting mining project that's near Broken Hill are the things that get me out of bed in the morning.
That was Robert Williamson talking about his career in